My Autoethnography by Bart Hill, Social Justice and Education, Fall 2015. I grew up in a small town called Edgewood, New Mexico. I grew up with my mother and father, an older brother and older sister. And because it's a country area, we had chickens, ducks, dogs, you name it. Our family was an average middle class white family. We spoke one language and got along fairly well. However, my parents did split when I was in elementary school, but we still were all close together. I guess you could say that growing up, I had it pretty good. This was due in large part because of At this point, I would like to talk a little bit about some of the experience I've had that illustrate how I've seen white privilege in action during my youth. When I was in middle school, I had the opportunity to play in a soccer tournament in Scotland. I had at the time my best friend Ryan come with me. He was African American and we were the best of friends. While we were walking on the streets of Glasgow, a couple of skinheads started calling my friend Ryan some terrible, terrible names. And it was then, seeing the fear in my friend's face, that I realized how fortunate I was. After this, we all immediately went back to our hotel room, and Ryan quickly shut the door, locking the deadbolt. He then went directly to bed, not saying a word, and it was at this time that I really understood his pain through the words he had heard. The next day, I tried to console him with my words, trying to distract him, trying to make him think of other things. But from then on, Ryan was just a different person throughout the whole trip. I could tell in his eyes that he didn't want to be in Scotland anymore. He just wanted to go back home. Another example of how I experienced white privilege came when I was a senior in high school. I had a friend who happened also to be African American, and we were discussing literature in our American literature class. It was during the break, and we were talking a little bit about who we thought were the best authors in the world. I was talking about Steinbeck or Hemingway, but he argued that Langston Hughes was the best, but I didn't know who Langston Hughes was. He told me that he wasn't surprised that I didn't know who Langston Hughes was. After all, he also didn't hear about Langston Hughes from any instructors, but in fact, he grew up listening to Langston Hughes from his parents, especially from his mom. After having this discussion, it occurred to me that there were a lot of authors that maybe I had not been introduced to. So, one of the main reasons I became an English major at NMSU was so that I could learn more about other authors. Looking back at this event now, I can see how privileged I was that I was able to have literature at school that reflected my cultural heritage, whereas others who listened to, say, Langston Hughes growing up don't. These are just two small examples of how white privilege has manifested itself in my life. So how can we start to combat white privilege and to create a more socially just environment for our students? What we can do is discuss it.
created using Powtoon.